Hello and happy Thursday, everyone. Caitlin just jumping in quick here with a reminder about our Twitter watch-along for the final episode this coming Sunday. That's March 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. Also, just letting you know that after our finale episode goes up, Mandy, Dr. Anya, and I will be recording a mailbag wrap-up episode. So if you have anything that Mandy and I may have missed about Season 1 that you want us to talk about, or any further questions for Dr. Anya, or want us to discuss what we are looking forward to in Season 2, please let us know. And now, into the episode.
Welcome to Desire Made Real, a Discovery of Witches podcast where we recap every episode of the television show spoiler-free. I'm one of your hosts, Manny Kay, and when I'm not talking about the forbidden love of a vampire and a witch, I'm talking about movies on my other show, Pop Culturally Deprived.
And I'm Caitlin, and when I'm not talking about a Discovery of Witches, I'm podcasting about Lord of the Rings on So You Want to Read Tolkien. Each week, we'll recap the episode, spoiler-free, and we'll also be joined by our friend, Dr. Anya, an evolutionary biologist, who will talk about the science of the show. We'll also include a segment at the end to discuss the books, how well the adaptation works, and we will likely dive into some spoilers here, but don't worry, we'll give you plenty of warning before we get there. Episode 7 was directed by Sarah Walker and written by Sarah Dollard.
And this is the episode where we meet a magic house, and Peter Knox can't stop sweating.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It really was. Honestly, that's all I got out of it. I mean, those are the big points. That's what I remember when I think about this episode, which is probably pretty terrible because it's a really good episode.
This is tied with episode 3 for my favorite.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah. I don't think I could pick one over the other. Mostly, I like them for two different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Like, episode 3, I just think is the best written and, like, edited and put together episode. This one just has my favorite, like, character interactions and everything.
Okay. I haven't picked a favorite episode from the season, and I probably won't until we do our final recap episode.
That's fair. That's fair.
I like them all.
They are all good.
So we jump right in pretty close to picking right up where the last episode left off. So this has Diana and Matthew getting ready to leave Sator, saying goodbye to Isabeau.
Mm-hmm.
Because now they are going to Madison.
Yes, and Diana doesn't look like she's had any injuries at all. She seems perfectly 100% okay. Which...
Kinda, yeah.
All right, sure.
I mean, there was a little shadow on her face, so they were trying to show that there was some bruising that was healing, I think. But they didn't do a great job with that. And I know we talked about in the last episode that the torture wasn't quite where we had hoped it would be. She definitely recovered from it very, very quickly.
The torture wasn't where we hoped it would be. Yep.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. No, it's true, though. Like, in the book, I think Diana still had to be sort of carried around at this point.
Yeah, she was still severely injured by the time they got to Madison.
And, you know, the physical stuff I don't really care about, but I am kind of sad that they took out how it mentally affected her.
Yeah.
And how, yeah. Because I think well, we can talk about that later. Anyways, and then just before they leave, Isabeau talks to Matthew and basically says something like, you know, Baldwin will hold off the congregation, but you have to come up with a plan. And I like how she's just like, this isn't Baldwin's problem. Get your shit together.
Pretty much. Isabeau knows what's what.
I love her.
I love her too. I still think she's probably my favorite character in the books. Not quite in the show, at least at this point, but I love in this opening how you can just clearly see that she feels absolute affection for Diana now, which is such a change from the first scene that we had between Isabeau and Diana, and I love it.
I do, and I like that she can do both, I suppose, is what I'm like. I don't know how to just say what I'm thinking.
Well, it proves that that she is open-minded the way that Matthew told us that she was, that she has the ability to grow, that she doesn't hate Diana just for the sake of being a witch.
Yes.
She loves Diana for Diana. She loves Diana because Matthew loves Diana.
Yes.
And I think it's wonderful.
It is very good. And then, so I guess that was technically like a cold open because we get the logo after this.
Mm-hmm. Which will be the second cold open that we've had in the run, which I thought was interesting. But again, it's because the entire rest of the episode happens in either Madison or Venice.
Yeah.
And so this one, I guess they just needed to kind of get that transition for us before the episode actually started.
Yeah, I like how they did it. It makes a very clear sort of line in the sand.
Yeah.
And there is also very clearly a bit where Matthew's monologue would be, because the monologue music, for lack of a better term, plays, but they don't put the monologue in.
Right, and we get this wonderful shot of just the car driving, which is, I mean, they have done his voiceover over a car driving before. Maybe that's why they didn't do it. But it very clearly could have been there, and I don't understand from a narrative perspective why they decided not to include it.
Was there one in the last episode? No, right?
I don't think so. I think they took it out.
Either.
When you say last episode, do you mean episode 6 or episode 8?
So, episode 6.
There was one in episode 6.
Oh, okay. I know there's not in episode 8. I didn't remember episode 6.
Yeah, this is the first time we've not had it. And it was a very glaring missing piece to me.
It's weird because, like, the first time I watched episode 2, I'd be like, oh, we're doing the monologue in all of them. And then in episode 3, I'd be like, okay, yep, that's fine. But now that they've taken it out, I'm like, why? Like, I didn't particularly like it in every episode, but now that it's gone, I'm like, what have you done?
Exactly. I think I just want some consistency.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I'm curious, because I don't think it's in the next episode either, so I'm really curious about if they're going to bring it back for season 2.
I think in a previous episode, I've mentioned a theory that I read about that I hope they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have.
In the spoiler section? Okay.
Yeah.
I really like that idea, and I hope they do it. So then Diana has this great line about Madison in the fall being the best Madison there is. And, like, I don't know if anybody's ever been to upstate New York in the fall, but it is gorgeous. Everything's orange and red, and there's very beautiful leaves and stuff. And this is very clearly not that when they then cut to dead trees and everything's gray. I'm like, why didn't you just cut that line? Why?
Aww. I thought it was still beautiful. It's beautiful in its own way.
I don't dislike it, but it's just so clearly not upstate New York.
Okay, that's fair. I feel like it could have been, it's just maybe they filmed it later than they meant to, because, I mean, the trees were there. They just didn't have leaves on them anymore. If those trees that they showed us had the fall leaves, the reds and the oranges and the browns, it would have been stunning. But we just got a forest full of trees with no leaves.
From what I remember, because I have done fall in England before, it's very much like it is here where I live in Vancouver, in that it's just rainy and gray. It doesn't get that big beautifulness. Not that it's that big of a deal. I just thought it was funny how they tried.
They did try.
And it's also very clear that, or at least I think it is, that the car they're in is still an English car. They just do camera angles to not let you see what side of the car the steering wheel is on.
I wasn't sure about that because it looked very similar to Matthew's car.
Mm-hmm.
But I noticed that Diana was driving, which surprised me because I really don't think Matthew would let Diana drive. I'm pretty sure in the book he didn't. But then I was looking at the car and I was trying to figure out, is she actually driving? I mean, she's on the side of the car where she would be driving if this was America and she's in America, but they never really showed the dashboard.
Yeah. In the book, she was too injured to drive.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that, but it would make sense for her to drive to her own home.
Right. exactly. I prefer to believe that she was actually driving and they just, I don't know, maybe they didn't have the budget for another Tesla. So, they made do with what they had.
So then they arrive at the house.
The house. Meet the house.
It's so great. I love the house in the book. It's quite possible that in the book, the house is my favorite character.
That is absolutely fair. The house is wonderful in the book.
It's so temperamental and just like does its version of yelling at them every now and then. It's so good. And so I'm glad that they kept some of that. They cut out all the ghosts, but still call it haunted.
Right.
Instead of like a magic house
Mm-hmm.
or an enchanted house, which would have made more sense. But that's fine.
Yeah, I think for book readers, it made absolutely sense how they did it. For non-book readers, it was probably a little more confusing.
Yeah. Like it's not very haunted.
Right.
So much as it's alive.
But it's a witch's house. Of course it's haunted.
They've cut out a lot of ghosts from the book.
Yeah, and what we have seen so far has been unclear if it's a ghost or not. Diana's vision when she was in the oubliette. Still unclear. Don't know if that was supposed to be her just having a vision or if they were actually there helping her.
And we get to meet Tabitha, the cat. I only bring this up because I think she's cute, and I like that they kept her in.
Yes. I wish they had kept a little bit more of Tabitha because in the book, gosh, we keep talking about in the book, and I know we have a whole section for in the book, but it just comes out of me when we're talking.
These aren't really spoilery things also. They're just little changes.
Yeah. So, but in the book, Tabitha really liked Matthew and they had a cute little relationship and we didn't get any of that. And I wanted more Tabitha, really.
And like Tabitha hates Diana so it's just hilarious that she loves Matthew.
Yeah.
So then we swap over to Venice. And Agatha's given Baldwin some shit, which I really like.
It's fantastic. It's the first time that we've seen Agatha stand up to somebody on the congregation. I mean, she's voiced her opinions before and she's been firm, but this is the first time where she's been almost on the verge of being angry and just saying, no, this is what we want. It was pretty great.
Yeah. I also like this bit because it really has all three sections or species, I don't know. They all know more than they're saying, and they all want Diana for specific reasons, but nobody's really willing to talk about. Like, it's just a really good dynamic going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's everybody is out for themselves, but they all have a common goal to get there.
Yeah,
Diana being that common goal. I mean,
kind of sucks that nobody's really thinking of her as a human person, but oh well. So much as like a thing that they need.
Right.
And I thought Baldwin did a really good job of putting all the attention onto Satu here, fulfilling his brotherly duties.
Yeah, he's a tricksy little bastard, and I thought it was brilliant because there wasn't even a hint of him lying or faltering or hesitating. It just came out, this is the direction that we need to go in, and it was splendid.
Yeah, I love Show Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of Book Baldwin, but Show Baldwin is fabulous.
Mm-hmm. And I liked him actually using the witches to kind of corroborate what Satu had done and forcing Peter to say, well, yeah, it looks like Satu did do this thing and we didn't support it.
Yeah.
It was nice to see him get called out.
It is nice to see Peter get called out. That should happen all the time. I hate that man.
Yeah, he did. The actor looked like he was sucking on a lemon while he had to say the words that he was saying about Satu, and it was incredible. You could see how much it hurt him to admit there was a witch doing something he didn't know she was doing.
And he did look sickly here. Like, I genuinely wondered if the actor was ill.
He kind of looked sick the whole episode.
Yeah.
Hence this is the one where Peter Knox sweats.
But why? Just seems an odd character choice for him to look so ill.
I don't know, unless it's just the stress of being out of control. Maybe he just can't handle the feeling of not being in control of everything, and it makes him come undone.
Maybe.
Because he strikes me as the type of person who thinks that he is always in control.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember it was last episode or the episode before where he attacked Satu in their own archive at the congregation for going against him. And he already knew she was so much more powerful than him, but he still 100% absolutely believes that he can control her. And I think him learning that he doesn't have everything as under control as he thought just probably does make him sick. It makes him feel ill and like the world is upside down.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then we get to cut back to Madison and we finally get everybody all together.
It's really good.
It is really good. Can we talk about how amazing Sarah is in this scene before we talk about how awesome they all are together? Did you notice the bumper stickers on her car?
I did, but they're the exact bumper stickers that are mentioned in the book, so I remembered them from there too.
Okay. I had to pause it so I could write down what they all say, but she has one that says, I am pagan and I vote. Yeah. She has one that says, Wiccan army, we will not go silently into the night. And she has one that says, my other car is a broom.
I love them in and of themselves, and I love that they kept that detail from the book. And I love that, like, the I am pagan and I vote seems very timely, but this book was written in 2009, you know?
Right. Yes.
And yes. I love that. I love that it's, okay, well, maybe it sucks that it still has to be a thing, but.
Well, I love that it's so unapologetic about who Sarah is. I mean, because not only do we have all of these bumper stickers, they're all on a Jeep Wagoneer, and she's wearing a pussy hat. So, I mean, they have just given us Sarah for who Sarah is, and it's utterly spot on and unapologetic, and I love it. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't even need her to talk at this point, and we know exactly who she is.
Yes.
I mean, of course, we've already seen her in previous episodes, but this is where we really get her instead of her just yelling at Diana about magic.
Mm-hmm. And I like that we see that she's okay telling everyone who she is. Mm-hmm. You know, like, this is the car she drives around town in.
Yep.
And I love that about Sarah. It's so different than what we've seen of witches in England.
Oh, yeah. Witches in England are so uptight.
But even Diana, right? She wasn't really, you know, she's not comfortable wearing her witchiness on her sleeve.
Yeah, that's true. Gosh, can you imagine Sarah and Jillian in the same room together?
No. I can't imagine Sarah raising Diana. Like I can, and it's hilarious, but they're so different.
Yeah. I think I can imagine M raising Diana.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it works for me. But I would almost really like to see some flashbacks of teenage Diana in Sarah's house, which I know we get in the later books. I don't know if they'll do it in the show, but
yeah, like they must have just been yelling at each other all the time.
Yeah, probably.
And then it's real tense right away.
Just a little bit. Like, Diana gives no fucks. She doesn't say hi. She doesn't say anything. She stalks up. Did you know I was spellbound? Like, she just drops this bomb in front of everybody.
Yeah. And I really love that it's M who knew what was going on and not Sarah. Because it just really shows the dynamics between all of them, and that M was always considered a part of the family. And I love that. And I just love Valerie Pettiford as Emily here. She's so good. I mean, Alex Kingston is also very good, but Valerie Pettiford just sells this character so very, very well. And everybody in this scene is amazing, and I love them.
Yeah, I was struck in this episode by just how involved M was in the family. She has more dialogue than Sarah does. She's comforting Diana more than Sarah does. And if you didn't know the family dynamic, you would almost expect M to be the one who's biologically related to Diana, and Sarah to be the one who is M's partner and not the other way around.
Although, again, I like that because I love the dynamic between Sarah and Diana and the differences and how they play off each other.
Yeah, no, it's
good.
Fantastic. And it absolutely speaks to their personalities. I mean, I believe that the way they've portrayed it is absolutely true to the character personalities. This is how, if these people were real, this is how they would relate to one another.
And if I'm remembering correctly from the book, but even before she met Sarah, M was Rebecca's best friend. Like, I think that's how they met.
Yes.
So I love that shows through in the relationship, even though we don't see too much of it, but we do get this feeling that M was involved with their lives, was just always involved with their lives. And I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the flashback scene later, you see that M and Rebecca were close, that Rebecca trusted her. So
I like that.
That was good.
And just in general, I think, and this is true for the whole show, I would say, because it's such a paranormal fantasy, it would be so easy for the actors to not really give it their all. But they really do, and it's really shown very clearly in this episode with how emotional Em and Sarah get, and how I just really like that the actors didn't treat this like a garbage show, you know?
Right. Well, even Diana in this episode, in this conversation that we're talking about, when she confronts them about being spellbound, you know, she asks, what was wrong with me? Why did they do this to me? You know, you don't spellbound somebody for no reason. And you can just see, God, and you can hear it in her voice. You can see it on her face. She is utterly broken at the knowledge that someone did this to her. And it was an amazing performance to watch. And to see her doing that next to Valerie Pettiford also being just as emotional. Wow, that's not a word. Valerie Pettiford being just as emotional. It was emotional. I need another word besides emotional, but it was impactful. How about that?
Yeah, it was. And it really gave weight to what was going on. And I really appreciate that. I mean, as much as this show and the books, I guess, get compared to Twilight, it was always very clear in Twilight that the actors thought it was garbage. Like, they would say that in interviews. And people, joke about it. And I love that is just not the case here.
Yeah, they enjoy the material. They love the characters they're playing, and they love to play those characters, and it comes across the screen. I think for everybody, even characters like Domenico and Satu.
Yes, definitely. Oh, Domenico, yes. Oh, we'll get to him later. I also just really loved how in the middle of all this emotional arguing or what have you, Matthew just sits down on the couch and is like, I will just be over here.
Yeah.
It's so good. And also, like, Diana's dressed in her regular light blue, and Sarah and Em are in, I can't even describe their style, but like thrift store patchwork almost. And then,
but still different. Like, they both have that kind of thrift store vibe, but done very, very differently. Em is more elegant and put together, but in this like flowy kind of way. And Sarah's in this, I'm going to wear overalls that I got from the thrift store kind of way.
And it's
really strange.
She always looks like she's come from a science experiment, but like not a good one, if that makes sense.
Yes, that is perfect.
Like a Dexter's Laboratory type of situation.
Right, I love it. That's exactly
and then
what
like beside them is Matthew in his all black with like looking very elegant and put together, and it's hilarious. I love it.
Oh yeah, he's the only one of the bunch who's put together until we get Miriam and Marcus later.
And then Diana runs off, and Matthew and Sarah say their first words to each other, which are, of course, a bit of a confrontation, and I love it.
Absolutely. But I love that Matthew's first words to Sarah are him trying to protect Diana.
Yes.
because he's trying to get Sarah to leave Diana alone, let Diana have some space. And Sarah's just like, don't you tell me what to do in my own house.
Yeah, it's so good.
It is pretty great.
And then the house decides to solve the argument by flashing back and showing what happened. Good old house.
Yeah, I like the way they did this in the show. I wasn't sure how they were going to do it, but it worked for me. Did it work for you?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
It did.
So the house decides, well, I'm going to make you guys stop arguing, and I'm just going to show you what happened, and you'll understand. And so we immediately jump to young Diana. Gosh, she's probably eight or 9, in her bed with her parents there. And this is clearly the scene where they are doing the spellbinding of her. And I hate the inconsistency that we get here, because the imagery that we've always gotten around Diana and her magic has been spiders and spider webs. It's the same imagery that we actually get in this scene. Like, she's being wrapped in spider webs. But the story that her mother tells her about what they're doing and why they're doing it uses colorful ribbons.
I guess it might be that everybody's name just left my head for a second there. Sorry. That Rebecca's trying to reassure Diana by using the word ribbons. You know what I mean?
Maybe. Yeah.
Like, the show isn't thinking of them as ribbons, but Rebecca wants Diana to think of them as ribbons. That makes me feel a little bit better about it. But yes, they should have just picked one and stuck with it.
Right. So I feel like they're trying to stick with the book says they're ribbons, so we're going to keep that when people talk about it. But we really like the spider thing because it makes it more dramatic and we can put these jump scares in. So we're going to really just show it this other way.
And speaking of spiders, this might be a good time to jump to Anya in the lab, because we've got some spider things to talk about.
Why does it always have to be spiders?
So this week, instead of beating the dead horse of me complaining about genetics, I thought it would be cool to talk about spiders. Since we find out in this episode what is the deal with the spiders that have been showing up. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the symbolism and a little bit about biology. And so you had mentioned in the first episode that in the book, it's not spiders that are shown when she's sleeping to symbolize her being spellbound. It's ribbons. And so I haven't heard the episode that you've recorded with just each other, but I was curious what your thoughts were on, like, why spiders? Just why spiders?
Well, it's spiders for spoilery reasons that we can't say yet.
Ooh, okay.
You don't even know yet because you haven't read all of the books.
That's interesting then, that the spiders are both spoilery but also like new to the TV show from the books. And I guess you can't really talk about why, but
yeah. It is interesting though, because when in this episode, when the house shows the flashback of Diana being spellbound, the story that her mom tells her while her dad is doing the spell uses ribbons, and she still kept the ribbons, as in her magic is being covered and hidden by ribbons. But all of the visual imagery that we get in the show is the spiders and the spider webs.
I do also think they decided to go with spiders because they're more atmospheric than, pretty ribbons.
Yeah, they're like, certainly in Western culture, they're like very creepy and mysterious. And I was like trying to think about where that comes from, or like images in pop culture of where spiders are being kind of like creepy and threatening. And the two ones that really came to mind for me were Shelob in Lord of the Rings, and then Aragog and all of his children in Harry Potter.
I'm going to very pointedly not talk about Lord of the Rings here.
Oh, come on. I thought that was just like giving you the perfect in.
Well, it's fine. I'll go on a whole spider rant about... No, it's better this way.
Do it. No, I want your spider rant. That's my whole point of being here, is to encourage spider rants.
Oh, no. There's too much content. Well, I just think it's interesting how Shelob, she hates light of any kind, but she's kind of descended from this spider who eats light and covets it. So she's an interesting character.
Interesting. Okay. So I did a little bit of research just to see the different ways that spiders are represented and kind of what they symbolize in other non-Western literatures and also maybe instances in European literature where they're not as creepy and mysterious and maybe helpful in other ways. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about other ways that spiders are used to emphasize my thesis for this segment, which is that spiders are not just creepy and mysterious, they're also like really cool and awesome. So I think the main one that people have heard about is probably Anansi the spider, who's a West African folktale character. And of course, through the slavery diaspora, he also is a very important character in Caribbean culture and mythology. And so Nancy is very clever and cunning and is often used to symbolize like wisdom and intelligence. And then particularly in the Caribbean, he's often celebrated as a symbol of resistance to slavery and survival in the face of slavery. And so he's often like uses his cleverness and trickery to turn the tables on more powerful people who are trying to take advantage of him. So that's, I think, one really cool way that spiders have been represented in a more positive and interesting way. So in a lot of different Southwestern Native American cultures, including the Hopi and the Navajo, they have a grandmother spider figure in their mythology who's actually the creator of the whole universe, which I think makes sense on kind of an intuitive level, right? Because like spiders weave webs, they're like make things, creating things that are like outside of themselves. And then spiders are often also appear in stories and mythology as helpers and teachers. So again, like a really positive, fun representation of spiders. And then my final example for like spiders in cultural mythology actually comes from Scotland, which is, I think, kind of relevant for the show. I mean, it's at least on the same island. And so I did not know this, but I'm sure Scottish listeners are very familiar with the legend of Robert the Bruce and the spider in the cave. And so Robert the Bruce was a military leader in Scotland who was fighting for liberation from England. And the legend goes that after fighting the English for a long time and having some kind of like disappointing losing battles, he ended up taking refuge in a cave. And so while he was trapped in this cave, taking refuge and feeling kind of sorry for himself, he watched this spider attempting to like do this specific move several times, and he watched the spider fail and fail again, and it failed 6 times, which was like the number of times that he had failed to defeat the English. And he told himself that if the spider tried again and succeeded on the 7th time, then he would also try again. And so the spider succeeded, and then he tried again and was able to succeed. So in that case, the spiders are really representing sort of like persistence.
I think it's interesting that the one sort of spider tale you haven't included here is the Greek one of Arachne, who, you know, was famously a better weaver than Athena, so Athena turned her into the first spider.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't necessarily include that one because I wasn't really sure. Like I feel like the fact, I don't know, the connection there is a little bit superficial, right? It's just kind of like weaving, and there's not like I don't think it really reflects on Arachne's personality characteristics or anything in a way that the other stories do. But you're right, that is like probably the most famous spider story. And it's where we get the word arachnid, right, which is like the group that spiders belong to. So spiders are arthropods, which is the larger group of insects, crustaceans, arachnids, and like centipedes and millipedes.
All very creepy.
Or very awesome, depending on your perspective.
I mean, it's nice that they eat mosquitoes, but other than that, ugh.
I mean, so they eat mosquitoes. They also eat a lot of other insect pests, like agricultural pests. And yeah, and that's one of the reasons why sometimes you can get unexpected effects of using pesticides, because if you're like trying to kill a pest insect and you use pesticides that kill not only the insects but all of their predators, most pests are sort of like better at bouncing back, and so you can actually end up accidentally increasing the amount of pests that you have because you like wipe them out temporarily, but then you also wipe out all of their predators, and then when they come back there's nothing keeping them in check.
That is also creepy.
Yeah, so I guess the other reason why I love spiders is just because I think they're really fun to watch. They make cool webs, you know, they're like sit and wait predators, and so it's really cool to just kind of like sit and watch them hang out, move around. I don't know, it's probably just because I'm a biologist at heart, but you know, there are very few organisms that I couldn't just like sit and watch for hours and be fascinated by.
You know, I have nothing against spiders if they are A, not in my house, and B, of like a decent size. You know, if they're too big, no thank you. I can't do that. But if they're...
So like, what's your like ideal spider size? Like quarter smaller, or like, is it more about the body size or the legs too?
Oh, the body. Oh, no, a big body. Nope. Before you said that, I probably wouldn't have known, but then I pictured like a big-bodied spider, and it made me feel not good.
Which I think is really a shame, right? Because, I mean, at least in North America, most spiders are not dangerous. They're not going to hurt you. They're definitely doing more good than bad, and so I think it would be great if people could maybe like tone down their arachnophobia a little bit and just, you know, if you see a spider in your house, just try and like catch it in a jar and then maybe put it outside or something.
Yeah, sure. That's what I'll do. Yep.
Okay, well, sounds like I haven't really convinced you that spiders are great.
Objectively speaking, I can say yes, great, wonderful. But when I see one inside, nope, my brain just stops working.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, and I think that's totally why they put the spiders in the TV show, right? Like, that's what they were going for. They wanted to get that just kind of, like, ooky, creepy reaction out of people, and so based on your reaction to it, that was probably a good choice. I think your audience reaction is much more typical than mine, which is like, ooh, what kind are they?
Big. They're big. That's the answer.
Yeah. And so to close out on this spider segment, I just wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite like citizen science outreach accounts, which is a Twitter account called Recluse or Not. And it's run by a really great team of spider scientists. And so basically, if you find a spider and you're not sure if it is a brown recluse or not, you can take a picture and then tweet it to them with your location and time of year. And then they will tell you to the best of their ability if it is a recluse or not. And they are compiling all of that data into a data set that they're going to analyze to look at not only like where are actual brown recluse spiders, but what are the most common types of spiders that people mistake for brown recluses, and that kind of thing. So it's a really cool project, and if you find a brown spider in your house and you're afraid it might be a brown recluse, I highly recommend sending them a picture to set yourself at ease. Or maybe not, if it is an actual brown recluse.
The opposite of setting yourself at ease.
Yeah. Freak yourself out.
Burn the house down. Okay.
Anyway, yeah, that's basically all I had this week. I didn't think we learned too much more about the science behind the main plot. And it was a good episode, but I didn't have anything else particularly to say about it.
All right. Well, then I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for stopping by my lab, and I'll see you next week.
So after those really great facts about spiders, everyone's favorite arachnid, we get some super creepy Peter Knox, everyone's favorite man in a wig. Oh God, it's so bad, that wig.
It was really bad.
I'm not usually the type of person to notice wigs. Like, Valerie Pettiford's wearing a wig too that apparently, I don't know, people have said they don't like. It doesn't bother me at all. But, oh, Peter, it's bad.
I feel like the only way that they try to age men down is to give them not gray hair and make it longer. And it just didn't work.
No.
It did not work for me. Like, it would have just... I probably wouldn't have noticed at all if they had just made him look exactly the same. I would have bought it. But then they had to put this wig on him and completely distract from the entire scene.
Yeah. But it does kind of... He's still creepy, though, with wanting to test this little girl. And, I hate him.
Mm-hmm.
I hate him.
Yep. So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was racking my brain while I was rewatching this morning. And I'm trying not to conflate the book with the show, which is hard to do, obviously, since we keep talking about the book too.
Yeah.
But the show seems to me to be very unclear on why Peter is so concerned about Diana and what exactly it is about her power that he's afraid of.
I don't think he's afraid of it. I think he wants it. Like, he wants to control it. There's a good line later in the episode that Satu says to Peter that I think really really sort of makes it clear what Peter's after.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that line, and I think that makes perfect sense, and I know we'll talk about it when we get there. But I was just thinking, especially watching the flashbacks and watching Rebecca and Stephen be so afraid, feeling unclear of what the driving motivation is behind that fear.
I always thought, and again, this might be stuff that I'm getting from the book, so maybe the show isn't doing this very well, but I always thought that if Peter had found that Diana was very powerful, because she wouldn't just have Rebecca's power, she would have Stephen's power too. And I think it's talked about in this episode, again later on with Satu and Knox, that Stephen was very secretive and didn't really let people know all that he could do. So I think Peter thought Diana would be very powerful, and if he tested her and found that she was, I would assumed he would have taken her away. And raised, under pretense of the congregation needing to help and protect young, powerful witches or whatever. But basically would have raised her to be his puppet.
Okay. Yeah, because Peter Knox would do some shady shit like that for sure. All right.
Again, I don't think that's laid out clearly, but I don't think it's a big jump to make either.
Right. I mean, they clearly set up that there's this power struggle and that Peter Knox wants power.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it's kind of unclear about why Diana is in the middle of all of this and why he was looking for her as a child, I guess. And I guess it's just because he knew how powerful, at the very least, he knew how powerful Rebecca was and how powerful Stephen's family was. And so his expectation was they would combine to create this really powerful witch.
And he'd already tried to control Rebecca and failed.
Right.
So he thought, if he'd got Diana when she was young. A lot of this is just conjecture, but...
Right, of course. Okay.
What I don't understand is if Rebecca and Stephen were so powerful, why did any of this happen? Like, why did they have to go away? And like, I can see where they have to go away and draw Knox away from Diana, but then how does Knox get the better of them? If they're both so powerful, how did Knox kill them?
So I have some headcanon here.
Okay.
So I expect Rebecca and Stephen, more Rebecca than Stephen based on what we know and what I know from reading the books, but I suspect they're kind of like Harry Potter.
Okay.
And how you've read all the Harry Potter books, right? Okay, so people who haven't read them, I'm going to spoil a little bit here. But at the beginning of book 7, the Death Eaters figured out which Harry was the real Harry because he was the one who went for the disarming spell instead of the actual offensive spell.
Right.
Because it was so fundamental in his character that he didn't want to hurt people. I feel like Rebecca and Stephen were the same way. They are good people. They believe in good magic. Peter Knox has dabbled in bad magic or dark magic. They would never do that. And so I feel like Knox was stronger than them because of his dark magic and because they wouldn't stoop to his level in that sort of same way.
Doesn't fit with things
My
in
head
the book.
canon. You don't think so?
There's specific things about Rebecca in particular in the book that doesn't particularly jive with. I can understand where you're coming from, that maybe they didn't want to fight him. Maybe maybe he took them unawares. I don't know. But it just seems like they knew, like in the goodbye scene in the flashback, you can tell that they know they're never going to see their family again.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that they're drawing Knox away for him to kill them. And I don't understand.
Yeah. Maybe they'll address it later.
Maybe they thought if they let him kill them, he would give up. You know, he would.
Maybe, because at that point, he had already tested Diana and thought she didn't have power. And so if they were dead, then he would think the power is just gone. And maybe Diana would be safe.
Maybe. Like, I guess that makes sense. But it just seems a shame that was their lives then, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I don't like it. It just seems like a big old waste. Fucking Knox.
Yeah. Fucking Knox. Oh, I wish that could be our episode title.
Yeah.
iTunes will not allow it.
That's unfortunate.
Effing Knox. Maybe I'll do that.
I do like right at the end of the flashback, you can hear the little girl's English accent creep in when she says definitely. And it's adorable.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought that was cute, so I wanted to bring it up. A good transition back into happier things.
Right.
So then we're back into not flashback. And Diana runs off, this time successfully. The house doesn't stop her. And she finds...
That's a lot to deal with. I mean, she just learned a lot of shit about her past and her parents.
She leaves her scarf on the forest floor. It's fine.
The blue scarf.
Yes.
With the blue sweater.
I think she's wearing blue jeans too, so.
Okay.
Matthew eventually follows, and as much as this is a very serious scene with them having a nice talk about what they've all just learned and how her parents knew about Matthew and that sort of thing, all I can really notice is when Matthew walks up, he goes down this slope and Diana goes up the slope so that they're kind of almost eye level, but Matthew is still significantly taller than her. And it's just hilarious how much shorter than Matthew Diana is.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that at all. That's so funny.
I don't know why I noticed these things, but
I was appreciating how the scene is juxtaposed next to the previous scene where she was just so distraught about finding out that she was spellbound, having him confirm it.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this scene, she's accepting what happened to her because she understands that her parents did it out of love and protection.
Mm-hmm.
And having her go from one to the other so quickly is actually kind of believable. Like, I think I bought it and I enjoyed the scene because then she was able to have fun and they were really cute whenever they started making out in the woods.
Yeah. I think you buy it because it was, she wasn't just told that that's what her parents were thinking. She was shown it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And she was shown about how upset they were about leaving her and what had happened and that they weren't sure that they'd made the right choice.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's believable.
And then we get Ghost Rebecca.
Yeah.
Briefly.
Smiling at them as they make out. A little bit creepy and weird, but I get what they were going for.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we're supposed to think that her parents approve of Matthew.
And are happy that she's found her way back to her magic now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the piece that really helped Diana accept it because we learned that most people who are spellbound just never get their magic back.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. Especially if the person who spellbound you dies, because it's that person who has to release you. But because Diana is special and her parents were special, it was bound to need, and somehow Matthew as well. And her knowing that and experiencing all of the things that she has experienced, I think put those pieces together for her, and it just kind of unlocked that acceptance.
Yes, it was very, very good. And then we get probably my favorite scene in the episode with Sarah and Em on the couch. And it's so good. And you can just feel how upset Sarah is about how Rebecca didn't trust her. And it's just such a good scene between them. I wish we'd gotten like a whole episode of just Sarah and Em. I love them.
Yes. I love the scene too. It's definitely probably my favorite in the episode as well, although there's some really good stuff in this episode.
There is.
But I love Alex Kingston's choice to refuse to look at Em. Like, she physically has her body turned away. She is talking to Em, but she's looking like steadfastly in the opposite direction. And you can just, like, her heartbreak and her sadness is just emanating from her. Like, you can see it almost.
Yeah.
And it's so good. I think that's why I like it. It's a tough scene to watch, for sure.
It is, yeah. And I like that
it's so good.
Yeah, it's tough because they sell it so well. Like, it's kind of a weird thing when you think about it. Like, she's upset that her sister spellbound her daughter and didn't trust, or whatever, and didn't trust her to tell her what was going on. And, like, it's kind of a weird, like, it's not really based in reality, I guess, but Alex Kingston does a good job of getting the emotion across, and the chemistry between the two of them is so good.
Yeah. I kind of want to see a spinoff of just Sarah and Em.
I do too.
Like, can we get Sarah and Em the college years?
Oh my God. Yes, please. That would be so good.
Yeah, we should like start a petition or something for that.
Yeah.
I bet there's some fanfic out there already.
Oh. Maybe, I don't know. The fanfic tends to just be Matthew and Diana.
Maybe we have a listener who likes to write fanfic, and we'll write that for us.
Ooh, the college years. I like it.
Yeah.
I will stay up till 4 a.m. reading that.
Right?
So then we get to Venice.
Do we have to?
Unfortunately, as much as I'd rather just stay at the Bishop Claremont Funhouse.
Right.
And we're in Peter Knox's room, and Setu is sitting beside him. He's asleep, although he's not sleeping very well. And she has his little magic ball thing. I hesitated before I said magic ball because my mind went to the gutter. Sorry. Which I like, that role reversal there. So Peter is asleep and sweating again and looking very ill. And then he wakes up and they have a very interesting conversation. Because I think until now, Knox has been trying to manipulate Setu and like get her to be his puppet, basically. And I think it's very clear here that she's not going to be his puppet, but they still sort of come to an understanding.
Yeah. Like, my whole reaction to this scene is they have a really fucked up relationship.
Yeah.
Like, the kind where she can actually say, this is why I betrayed you, but then they still come together in, like you said, some sort of understanding where they're not trying to kill each other or hate each other. They still, their mutual desire of power is above all else. And it's just weird.
And I do think it comes from two different places. But so when they're talking, Setu realizes that Knox was the one who killed the bishops, Rebecca and Stephen, and that he used an opening spell on them. And Knox says something like, Rebecca could have been on the congregation and blah, 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 and then says it was so selfish of her to not do that, to keep the power from him, I guess. And God, I wanted to punch him in his fucking face when he said that.
Has he ever said anything that didn't make you want to punch him in the face?
I mean, sometimes he lies. And he pretends to. No, because even then I know he's lying.
Right?
And then after they talk it out, Setu says, and this is the line I was referring to before, you loved her, but the power you sensed, you loved that more.
Yeah, I think that is the most aware of Peter Knox that anybody has ever been.
Yeah. And I think that's very clear what he was after and why he did the things he did.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess what brings them together really is Setu mentions the prophecy.
Yeah.
And how Diana could destroy the vampires, as this prophecy says. And so they have to get her away from Matthew. I don't know. I guess that gives them a common purpose.
I guess. It's just, watching it just felt so wrong, though. Because clearly these two people have worked against each other at this point. They're both powerful. They've both tried to manipulate the other. And in this conversation, they're basically acknowledging these things and then saying, oh, well, it's okay. We're going to still continue to do these things. And it's weird.
And
it's just weird.
One thing that we did learn in the last episode, I think, is that Setu is more powerful than Knox.
Mm-hmm.
And Knox probably doesn't like that. So that's just another, fucked up bit in their relationship.
Right? The power differential has definitely shifted.
Mm-hmm. I hate them, but I hope we get more of them.
Yes.
That's the only way I can really explain that. I'm interested to see how their relationship plays out since I know how things end.
Right.
I'm interested to see how that happens. And then we go back to the funhouse, thank God.
Yay!
And we get a scene that's just Matthew and Sarah, which I wish we'd had 5 more. This episode could have been 2 hours long and just more funhouse shenanigans.
Yeah. Honestly, I wish we had at least 2 more episodes in this season so that we could flesh out some of this stuff at the house.
Yeah.
And Matthew and Sarah, because Matthew and Sarah come to this mutual respect of their love of Diana.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really get to see much of that process because we get to see the fun of them butting heads, but that's really all we get.
Yeah, we don't get to see them come to an understanding.
Right.
Although we do see them, well, never mind. That's next episode.
Yeah.
But I love their little argument here and the way that they both just make, they give each other looks without pointing those looks at each other, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And it's just really good.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I love Sarah's line, you're trying to scare me, but I'm already scared. I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, I like that we get Sarah coming at it from a purely logical perspective of, she needs to start at the beginning. And we get Matthew coming from the perspective of, no, she needs to protect herself now. So we need to do these really big things. And then even though it's kind of just a throwaway line, Sarah says, people haven't been able to do those things in centuries or years or however long she says. And it's another little thread of the idea that witches are losing their powers.
Yes.
And it's just thrown in such a way that makes perfect sense. And if you don't pay attention to it, it's fine. But if you notice it, it's a great way to tie this piece of the puzzle back into this full story that we started way back in Matthew's lab in Oxford.
Yes, that is a very good point. Eventually, Diana comes in and makes peace between the two of them, I guess. Basically says she'll do both, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
And then we get some magic training, and it's not going too well.
No, not really. It's okay. You're just going to try. She gets so frustrated. It's great.
Oh, I would too.
I don't know if I would have been as gracious if I had been in her position. I am a very impatient person, and I probably would have thrown that book across the room, honestly, for being real.
It's hard to say for me because me is me. I'd be like, oh my God, I can do magic. I don't care that it doesn't work. But if I'd grown up knowing that magic was real, I'd probably feel differently about it.
Okay, that's a fair point. Yes. Like, if I just learned this stuff right now, I would not be frustrated at all. I'd be like, oh, okay, it's just going to take practice, but it's so cool.
Yeah.
I can light fire, even if it's the wrong thing on fire.
Yeah, like I burned down the house, but man, it was cool.
Right? Yeah.
And then we get this terrible conversation between Matthew and Em. And like the actors do their utmost best with it, but it was just very poorly written, and I don't like how they did it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, they're setting up time walking as a thing that happens.
Yeah, this is the first time we've heard the words Time Walker on the show, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so clearly they tried, because they did set up foreshadowing of time walking in episode 1 when Diana bumped into her dad, or she thinks she bumped into her dad outside of the bod. But we haven't heard about time walking since then. There's been nothing since that first episode that even hints at this.
Yeah.
And so it feels like it comes completely out of left field.
And it's so very clearly a setup for what's about to happen that like I just wish Matthew, I wish he'd found the box, commented on how he thought it was like from the 17th century or whatever century he says, and just had M kind of be like, make a sound. And then that's it.
Yes.
And then he could have come to the realization in that next scene.
When she actually disappears. Because having him just say, I would swear this was new. Was he a time walker? Like, how do you make that leap that quickly?
Yeah, and then the very next scene, him being like, oh, you time walked. Like, it's just so poorly written.
Yeah, it was definitely like, it was an exposition dump. It was like they just gave up. They were like, we need this information in the episode, so we're just going to do it, and we're not going to try.
And it could have been slightly better with not much work.
Yes. Especially for something that's so important to the plot that we're going to see in the next episode.
Yeah. But whatever. We're introduced to time walking, and then we go back to Venice, and we get Domenico and Juliet here. And I love this scene because we're really starting to see that Domenico is a manipulative little fucker. And I love it.
Yeah.
It's so good. Like, I have no idea what Domenico actually wants, what his end goal is. He literally just seems to be an agent of chaos.
Yes, that's exactly what I think it is. But I love that we've been asking this question since the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Because he's so consistent in such a way that doesn't give us answers.
Yeah. And like, I think there was a time when the show wanted you to think that Domenico wanted Juliet, but I don't think he does. I think he just wants to use her like every other man that she's ever met.
I think he wants power. I think he wants the power that the de Clermonts represent. And which is why most of the chaos that he's sowing has to do with Matthew and his family.
Yeah.
But we have no actual motivation. Like, we don't know, like you said, we don't know what his goal is. We don't know why he's doing what he's doing or what he wants to get out of it. Because honestly, from my perspective, is if the de Clermonts get knocked out of power, Jared Bear's going to step into that vacuum. I'm not sure that Domenico would benefit from it. Maybe he thinks he would, or maybe he thinks he can manipulate Jared Bear out of it too. I don't know.
Well, one thing that I like is that he seems to want power, but he doesn't seem to want it in an obvious, like, I want the head seat way. He wants to be in the background controlling things.
Right.
And so
and that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's sowing all of this discord and he's doing all of this manipulation without anybody really seeing it. And it's great.
Yeah. And the actor is so good. It's a great little scene. Very short.
Yeah. I love that he's the one who ends up with Satu in the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Which I know we're going to talk about when we get there, but it's just all of his scheming is paying off. We just don't exactly know how yet.
So then we go back to Madison and we do the bit that we just sort of referred to where Diana time walks after arguing with Sarah.
Yeah, I really like this scene. She has a line. So she's really frustrated. Sarah's really frustrated because they're doing more magical training, and Sarah is teaching Diana what she knows, and it's just not working for Diana. She can't get it right. And Diana is self-aware enough to know that, and she says to Sarah, "Your magic works differently than my magic."
And the look on Sarah's face when she kind of realizes that she can't help Diana. Aww. It's so sad.
Like, it is really sad, but I love that Diana is getting comfortable enough with herself and her own magic to understand this about herself.
Yeah.
Like, she's not internalizing this as, I can't do magic. She's internalizing this as, this is not the kind of magic that I can do. Mm-hmm. And that's so far ahead of where she was even 2 episodes ago.
And it's also interesting to note because previously Matthew has said she can do spell work, like her markers or whatever showed that. So why she can't do this particular spell work is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Sarah, though. I just want to give her a hug this whole episode.
I know. Like, I feel like nothing happy happens to her in this episode other than at least having Diana back at home.
Yeah. And then in frustration, Diana, throws her hands up in the air and disappears.
Dun, dun, dun.
And reappears out in, I guess it's a barn?
Yeah.
I know, they don't have animals, so. And Matthew runs out there to make sure that she's okay and is like, oh, you just time walked, because your father could time walk, because we just set that up 2 seconds ago.
Right. Yes, that is exactly how that scene went down.
Yep. And what I do like about the scene is that apparently while filming in the barn, Matthew and Teresa could not stop laughing. And you can kind of tell that they're just ridiculously grinning at each other in this scene.
Yes. That actually made that scene make more sense to me when I read your note about that, because I was thinking the scene is very, very light in a moment where it really shouldn't be quite this light. Like, they shouldn't be laughing their way through these lines.
Yeah.
So knowing that they were just having fun while they were filming it made it make more sense.
Yeah. I also think it's why they kiss and the camera immediately cuts away. Like, it's immediately a wide shot.
And then we cut back to London or Venice somewhere. And it's probably
London,
one of my
think.
other favorite scenes. Yeah, I think they're in Hamish's office. So we get Agatha and Hamish together, my 2 favorite demons.
It's really good. I'm glad we got to see it because I don't think we ever see them together in the books.
I don't think so.
So I like that we got this scene.
Yeah, it was pretty great to kind of bring everything together, like to bring our different worlds together.
Yeah.
And it was, I just like their characters. And so just watching them talk to each other, I don't care what they talk about. I'm going to like it.
And I like that it's clear that they know each other, that they have a working relationship, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hamish knows who Sophie and Nat are.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder why Hamish isn't on the congregation. And although, like Agatha seems to know about his friendship with Matthew, so maybe that's why. Or maybe he just doesn't want to be. I don't know. But he seems like a well-known demon who's, not suffered from the things that demons usually suffer from, if that makes any sort of sense. So I just kind of wonder why he wouldn't be at least considered for the congregation.
I suspect he doesn't want to be.
Yeah, that's true.
He strikes me as somebody who wants power from behind the scenes.
Or doesn't want power at all, really. I don't know.
Maybe power is the wrong word. But he obviously has some sort of power in the world. He's very successful. He controls money and he does some things in the government, and so it just makes me feel like he likes knowing things and being good at things.
Yeah, that's how I always interpreted it, I guess, that he likes using his quote-unquote abilities, and just because of how they work in the world, that gets him a certain amount of influence, but it's never been the influence that he's after. He just enjoys what he does.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And I do really love how he says, what, you think Diana's the savior of the demons? It's just such a ridiculous line.
It is a ridiculous line.
But it's good. I like it.
And neither of them laughed.
Mm-hmm.
It was delivered very seriously.
More professional than Matthew and Teresa.
Very much so, yes. And then we go to church with the vampires.
Okay, so I'm not a church-going person. I have been to Catholic Mass or Catholic ceremonies? No, that's not a word.
No, it is Mass. Catholic Church is Mass, yes.
Right, no, but I've been to weddings.
Oh, okay.
That's the only, like, Catholic situations I've ever been involved in a church. And there were, like, rules about what you could wear.
Yes.
And I just don't think Juliet is adhering. She looks too good, you know, like she just looks very sexy and amazing in that dress, and it just doesn't seem very churchy to me, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it wasn't churchy. I mean, it wasn't immodest, really. It wasn't like super low cut. It was long, but it was garish. It was red, bright red. It was the color of sin.
Maybe that's all it is. And maybe she's just like a really good looking woman. So I'm like, this just doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Yeah. She carries herself very confidently, for sure.
Oh, now I feel like the patriarchy put those thoughts in my head, and I'm ashamed of them.
Well, no, I mean, I think they chose that dress in that setting on purpose. So I think you were supposed to get some sort of feelings from it. I'm not entirely sure what those feelings are. I still believe that Juliet wearing red is a foil to Diana's blue, because this is not the first time we've seen Juliet in red.
Mm.
And this was the scene where she makes up her mind to throw Gerbert under the bus and leave him.
Love it.
To go do something about Matthew. Yeah. But why are vampires having a meeting in church during a church service?
Well, like, I can understand why Gerbert goes to church. He used to be a pope. It's how he got a lot of his power in Venice. Maybe he still, like, rules it from behind the scenes, you know? Or has something to do with it. So I can understand that. And he would bring his, you know, his sexy underling just to show her off because he's an asshole. But what in the heck is Baldwin doing there? And who is that woman sitting right next to him? And why are they chatting?
Right? There is no way nobody else did not hear what they were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, the acoustics in that kind of room, you can't talk normally and not have everybody hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't make any sense. Like, and it seemed very much as if Baldwin were there to meet them.
It did. Because why else would he be there? I don't think Baldwin is Catholic. And even if he is, why would he go to what is obviously Gerbert's church? Like, it just, the whole...
Yeah, it didn't make sense.
I don't like it.
But it gave us a great scene with Juliet in a gray dress.
Yeah, it is a good scene. And the smile on her face as she walks away is fabulous.
So, can Juliet ever be free?
I don't think so. Because her walking away here is still... She's still being manipulated by Domenico.
Mm-hmm. But she thinks she is.
Yeah.
She thinks she has made this choice for herself.
Yeah.
Kind of depressing.
Realizing that her whole existence here, because when I first watched the show, I didn't put it together that Domenico was still manipulating her. I thought he genuinely wanted her to be free.
Okay.
And that made me more upset about the way Juliet's character arc ends.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that there is literally not a single moment in the show where she is not being manipulated by some asshole man, it doesn't make me happier about it, but makes it seem, it's hard to talk about because it's not till next episode, but
right.
makes that whole her doing what she does at the end of this episode makes it seem less catty, you know, makes it seem less like, I'm just gonna go after this woman who's touching my man.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that she's just never had a moment, I think, in her entire hundreds of years being alive, possibly thousands. I don't remember how old she is. Like, just never a single moment where she wasn't being manipulated by somebody. Or being, like, when she was human, like, Gerbert found her in a brothel. So even even before she was a vampire, she was always just being shit on by men.
Right.
And that made me feel a little, a little bit more okay with how her story goes. Not okay with it. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. It changes the perspective and the feeling of that arc.
Mm-hmm.
But we can talk about that more in depth next week.
Yeah. And then we're back to the woods in Madison, and Matthew and Diana doing like defensive training.
I like the scene a lot.
It is really good. And
I feel like they had a lot of fun filming this scene.
Yeah. And I love how the training isn't working. Her magic isn't like triggering or whatever until Matthew sort of knocks her down and she cuts her hand and she's bleeding, and Matthew's immediately like, it's fine, I'm cool. And she's just immediately like, I'm going to tease the heck out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it.
Well, because, yeah, she absolutely knows that her magic's not going to be triggered at this point until she feels like she's in danger, and she absolutely does not feel any danger from Matthew.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fake training. He's not going to hurt her. And so this gives her the opportunity to just absolutely prance in front of him and tease the shit out of him to provoke him. And it is awesome to watch.
Yeah. And I just, like, back in episode 1, I talked about how I didn't like that scene on the riverbank because it was overly dramatic and kind of whatever. But I love that it gave us this scene of Diana making fun of how overly dramatic Matthew is.
Yeah. Oh, I like how she lowered her voice to be like, don't run.
Oh, yeah. So good.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
And he has his little growl as he chases after her. It's very good.
Yeah.
And then Diana flies and the special effects are terrible as usual. But then she crashes into him and he grabs her butt again. I just wanted to point that out
a lot. We should have kept a counter, like a running tally of how many times he grabbed her butt.
I'm pretty sure it's only 3. But in 8 episodes, 3, that's almost half.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you call what she did flying, because it didn't feel like flying to me. I don't know what it felt like, but it didn't feel like flying.
I think that's just because the special effects are bad.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that one.
Because she jumps up into the air and she stays there.
That's true.
I don't know what else to call that.
Okay.
Floating?
All right. I guess it felt more like floating or hovering, or like it felt like a really big jump and then just hanging out. But I guess technically that's flying. It was just, you're right, it was done poorly.
Yeah.
Don't laugh at me, it's fine.
No, I think this is just bad special effects.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But it does take us into some really great sexy times.
Yeah, those are very well filmed.
Very well filmed. It's actually a nice respite after the really bad special effects in the woods.
Yeah. And they play that really good song called I Found by a band called Amber Run. It's again a little on the nose because there's literally a line that's like, I found love right where it wasn't supposed to be, or something like that.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, you guys found the most literal thing you could. But it is also just a very good song. It
is a good song.
For the
Absolutely
sexy
a good
times.
song. Whoever does the music just has this uncanny ability to find like spot on music that is actually sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't feel like they tried to shoehorn this terrible song in because it's got lyrics that they wanted. Like, they found genuinely good music that has the same meaning.
Yeah, and it
that they're looking for.
Fit the scene, too.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about their sexy times for a minute.
Okay.
Like, to me, it felt heavily, heavily implied in this episode that they actually had sex.
Yeah. I have seen posts on Tumblr from people who haven't read the book that are like, did they? Didn't they? What?
Like, I feel like, so previously, I think it might have been like episode 4 or 5 where we had the bundling conversation. So the show has very obviously set up this idea that Matthew doesn't want to actually have intercourse at this point in their relationship, which is why they did French bundling, quote unquote. But we haven't, like, it's never been mentioned again. It was just kind of briefly mentioned in passing there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we haven't had any explanation of why they're doing this. And then we get a scene like this that's cut in such a way that if you haven't read the book, you full on believe they just had sex. And so I feel like they could have done this better.
Yeah, I get that they wanted to have like a good sexy scene and then follow up with that serious conversation, and that maybe there just wasn't a place in there for them to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But it is odd. Or it's not odd, but it just means they're going to have to talk about it next season.
Yeah.
And then people are going to be like, "Oh, they didn't have sex?"
Right. People are going to be like, of course they've been having sex since season 1. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But no, they haven't.
And it also, like, if they just randomly bring it up next season, it's not going to, like, it's hard to talk about this without spoilers. But, like, there's reasons in Matthew's head, at any rate, that he doesn't want to have sex. And if we're not diving into that, I just think we're missing a bit of his character and their relationship.
Right. Yeah. That's why I feel like there should have been a little bit more explanation back in the episode where they did talk about bundling.
Yeah.
Because then in that episode, if I'm remembering correctly, it was basically, do you know what bundling is? This is the thing we're going to do now.
Yeah.
And then I don't think that's what bundling it is. It is in France. You know, like they turned it into a joke instead of giving us an actual insight into Matthew's character.
Even in that episode, you could think that they had sex, though.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But if they had given us a little bit of his motivation in that conversation, it would have been enough to flow through to this episode, I think.
Yeah.
But it's easily forgettable because it feels like that was almost a throwaway line, especially if you haven't read the books.
Yeah.
And so there are just so many things that they've done that they've had to truncate in the show that makes me wonder how they're going to like resolve them for later story points.
Yeah.
And I think they can. I just don't know how. And I'm really curious how they're going to do it.
It is possible with this particular one. They just won't address it.
Yeah. You're right. That's possible.
Which I think is kind of a disservice to Matthew's character. And to not because I think he's making a good choice here, because I think, again, spoilers, but I think it takes out some of his growth.
Yeah.
By not putting him in a lesser place here or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. But the sexy times do lead us to a nice conversation between Matthew and Diana where he finally kind of tells her about Eleanor and Cecilia.
He doesn't. I'm sad that we don't get specifics because it's implied heavily that he killed them. And that's just not.
I think he outright tells Hamish that he killed them. Or Hamish tells him that he killed them. Right?
I forget. It's like they say that he hurt them. And they're obviously not around anymore.
Right, but they're also human, so they could have died from old age.
This is true. But I don't know. You get the specifics of them in the book, and we can talk about that in our spoiler section if we want. And I feel like him just having this guilt and us not knowing exactly what happened makes it seem like he just gave in to his baser vampire instincts and drank their blood.
Right.
Which is not what happened.
No. But we do get Diana being pretty awesome in this scene.
Yes.
When she tells him that he won't hurt her because she won't let him.
Yeah. And she says, "I'm powerful."
Right. She says, "I'm not a human. I am a powerful witch, and I'm not going to let you do this thing to me." And I just kind of want to stand up and say, fuck yeah, Diana.
And she does it while, like, booping him on the nose. And it's so good.
Yeah, little nose boop.
Like,
I want a nose boop about a vampire.
While telling him that he can't hurt you because of how powerful you are. Yes.
Yeah.
I do feel a little bit robbed that we didn't get a morning after scene where they're like grabbing their clothes that they left strewn about the house and getting caught by Sarah M. Or like Sarah and M finding their clothes all over. Like, I'm very intrigued about the dynamics of these two couples living in a house together. I think it could have been hilarious.
I think I would prefer to have a scene of Sarah and M waking up in the morning and walking through the house and the house hiding
The clothes. That would have been good, yeah.
That would be fantastic.
I do miss, in the book, the house has a very keen sense of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be very accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. And then a taxi pulls up. And briefly, I expected it to be Sophie and Nat who got out of the taxi because we had just come from that conversation between Agatha and Hamish and wanting to introduce Sophie to Diana. But alas, it is not Sophie and Nat. It is actually better because it's Miriam and Marcus in Madison.
I've missed Miriam and Marcus.
Yes,
I love
them
a
little
so
while.
Much. And the scene where Miriam hisses at the cat and then says, like, I don't think we have to go inside. It's fine. And Marcus is just like, why are you being this way?
It's like, that's not very sociable.
Yeah. And Sarah opens the door and Miriam and Sarah just stare at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And Emma's immediately like, I will rescue us all.
Yeah, I love how they set this up as, like, Sarah and Miriam are so similar and Marcus and Em are so similar.
Yeah.
Like Sarah and Miriam are both like roosters, like with their feathers ruffled. You know, they're just like cowing about. And Marcus and Em are like, okay, how can we fix this?
Yeah.
Like, how can we make everybody just get along? It's great.
And Marcus is just so like excited to be there and talking and meeting people. It's
right.
I have missed Puppy Dog Vampire.
Well, especially since we find out that he's just really excited to meet them because he's met Sarah Bishop back in the war.
Yeah, their ancestor. I love when Sarah, like, I guess he's staring at Sarah and she says, "You got a problem, Junior?" And he's immediately like, "You look so much like your ancestor who I met some hundreds of years. I have no idea when the American Revolution was."
That would be leading up to the independence of the American country, which happened in 1776.
So like 300-ish
somewhere. Yeah, like early 1770s. I think my favorite thing about that line is that Marcus is obviously hundreds of years older than Sarah, and she calls him Junior.
Yeah. But like it's right after she says Junior that he's like, "I knew your ancestor 300 years ago."
Right?
And she doesn't back down. She still looks at him like, "Stop talking."
Exactly.
So good.
Like, I think he intends it to be something that would soften her towards him. And instead, she just like steadfast in her hatred of vampires in this moment.
Yeah.
Just like nothing you can say is going to make me smile at you right now.
It's so bad, though, because I just love Marcus.
Mm-hmm. He's so great. He's so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're all yelling at each other, and the house doesn't like it.
Which I think is kind of funny since the whole episode has been people arguing, and the house hasn't really done anything. But
right?
Whatever.
Yeah. And the house decides to stop the arguing by spitting out a page of Ashmole 782 for them that's in an envelope from Sarah's father. And I saw somewhere on Reddit somebody referred to this wall as the vagina wall.
Yep.
And now I can't unsee it.
Yep.
Why do people have to do that? Because then you just can't unsee it.
I very specifically didn't put that in the notes because so I like that you brought it up anyways.
Like, I was like, no way. And I went through and I paused it frame by frame. And I was like, I have to see what people are talking about. And I was like, oh my God, it's a vagina wall.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, no, there's nothing to be said about that. It's an interesting design choice. They could have just had it flow down from the ceiling.
Right. I'm pretty sure in the book it either came out of the fireplace or like between the cracks in some like wood in the wall or something.
Yeah.
Like the wall itself didn't just open. Like a magical crack didn't appear. So yeah, interesting design choice, I think.
And I like that we've now passed on this to our listeners. You will never not be able to see the vagina wall.
You are welcome.
But it is a page of Ashmole 782, and everybody's like, ooh. I don't really know what else to say about this. It's got a note on the envelope from Stephen, and Sarah and Miriam kind of fight over it.
Yeah, so it shows a picture of, I think it's supposed to be the alchemical wedding, which they don't say here. But if you look at it, it's a photograph of a man figure in black and a woman figure in white. At their feet, there's a lion and a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And Miriam or Marcus, one of them, says that, oh, that's got Matthew's insignia on it. And so obviously we know in that moment it's supposed to be somehow important. I mean, obviously it's important. It's from Ashmole 782.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what starts the struggle between Sarah and Miriam both wanting to look at the page.
Yeah.
And we get more tension between everybody.
Sarah has a bit of a throwaway line here where she mentions that, or Diana mentions that she noticed 3 pages had been cut from the book. And then Sarah says if pages being torn from the book would explain why the magic was broken. And they don't really dive into that, but it is like that sort of sets up the whole plot going forward, that they have to find the missing pages in order to return them to the book. So,
well, it's interesting because it's unclear. Reading that out of context almost makes it sound like breaking the magic is what was what caused Diana to be able to call the book itself, but that's not the magic she's referring to. Specifically, she's referring to the words flowing too fast for Diana to read.
Yeah.
That's the magic that's broken, that because the pages were taken out, it broke the spell on the words in the book. And that's...
Or the magic that the book has intrinsically, not the spell that was on the book.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we'll probably definitely get more of that next season. We'll dive more into that. Probably definitely, yes. We sound so confident, don't we?
Yep. And then just as Sarah and Miriam are about to have an all-out cat fight, we go back to Venice with Domenico walking around and Satu skulking around, and it doesn't turn out for Satu.
It really doesn't.
Not much happens in this scene other than Domenico gets... Satu still doesn't have her magic back.
Yeah, I thought for a moment watching this that Satu was trying to play Domenico and that she really did have her powers. And somehow she was trying to trap him for some reason. But that is not what happened. She really did not have her powers, and he captured her.
I guess we forgot to mention in the previous scene with Satu and Knox that Knox confirmed that her magic will come back. She just takes time.
Right. Yeah. So I think because of that, I assumed that somehow, like, it just felt like the way they filmed it with her skulking is a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like she was doing it on purpose, trying to trap him. And the way that she ran was somewhere that was a dead end.
Right.
And I wouldn't expect Satu to do that. And so it felt like she was trying to trap him. And that's not what happened. So I don't know what the end goal of this is going to be at this point, other than we know that now Domenico has her. But it was curious.
Why was Satu walking around anyways if she doesn't have her powers? Like, that just seems a poor choice on her part. Especially since Peter knows people are looking for her.
Yeah, let's go walk around the town that the congregation is based in while the congregation is looking for me. Because that's a smart idea.
Although maybe Peter wanted her to be found, because then they could stop looking for her and get back to Diana. I don't know. But it just seems a weird choice for Satu to make.
Yeah. But then we go back to Madison.
Yeah. And we get Matthew and Diana looking at the page alone. Who knows where everyone else went? Maybe outside to watch Sarah and Miriam have their cat fight. Now there's something that I want. Sarah versus Miriam in a friendly fight. Ooh, that'd be good.
I think I just want to watch them yell at each other.
Oh no, I want vampire versus witch.
Oh, okay.
It'd be so great. But like friendly, you know? They're not trying to kill each other. They just want to know who'd win. This is off topic. But Diana seeing her dad's handwriting on the envelope makes her realize that he also wrote in Ashmole 782.
Mm-hmm.
So he must have had it in his possession at one point. And that this causes Matthew to speculate that the spell hiding the book was put on the book by Stephen.
I think that's an interesting leap to make.
Yes.
Like, I feel like Matthew makes a lot of logical leaps in this episode that are bigger than they should be, based on the information we're given in the show.
Yeah, especially since he doesn't talk it all the way through. Like, he doesn't say Stephen could have time walked back to the 1800s and put the spell on it then, since this book has been missing for hundreds of years, or 100 years, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he just says Stephen could have put that spell in the book, and then mentions Diana seeing him outside of the Bodleian. So it almost kind of implies that he put the spell in the book then, which wouldn't work. And yeah.
So, fun fact.
Okay.
Not a fact, actually, at all. Fun anecdote. So, I was watching this with my boyfriend because I've gotten him interested in this, and it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But he was watching the first episode with me when he got really interested in the 2 different inscriptions that were in the book. And then right after that, she runs into the guy that she thinks is her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he immediately looked at me and he said, her dad wrote that in the book, right?
Interesting.
Like, he had no context. He hadn't read the book. All he had seen was the first episode. And that's immediately what he thought. It's like, how does your brain get there?
So, well, maybe the show does a better job than we can. Because since we've read the book and we know everything, like, we can't.
Maybe.
Our brains aren't thinking of it that way.
Yeah, maybe.
So maybe the show does a better job than we think.
So I guess listeners, if you also got that foreshadowing way before this episode, let us know, because we think the show was poorly written in that sort of foreshadowing way, but maybe it really wasn't.
Yeah. So then we're back to Domenico and Baldwin. And Domenico hands over Satu and says, look, I have found the missing witch. We can get back to looking for Diana. And Baldwin is like, oh shit.
Baldwin tries real hard.
Yeah.
He does. He's like, no, I want to punish Satu. We need to focus on this right now. She was at my house. Blah, 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 blah. And Domenico was just like, I'm not buying your shit.
Yeah.
This is not happening. It's pretty great. It's a good conversation to watch them try to out-manipulate each other.
Yeah. And Domenico at the end is just like, I'm going to hold on to her for now, and I'll let you know what I want. And it's the first time that Domenico has out loud been like, this is all about me.
Yeah.
You know?
So one day we might actually also find out what Domenico wants.
Gosh, I hope so.
I hope so too.
And then we go back to some training in the woods. Sadly, no sexy times or butt grabbing this time.
But Diana tries real hard.
She does. She obviously would prefer that.
This would be way more fun if you were just over here kissing me.
Yeah.
She does try.
Oh, and Matthew has his cute little grin. We don't see him smile too much, so that was nice.
Mm-hmm.
But then she walks into Puffy Vest Juliet, which I love that she went from sexy red dress to puffy vest. It's great. And then the episode ends with almost a literal dun dun dun.
Yeah, my notes end exactly that same way.
Yeah.
I was like, it's Juliet. Dun, dun, dun. Because, that's all we get. Like, Matthew doesn't even make it into the shot. It's just Juliet grabs her, fade to black.
Yeah.
And I've seen some discussion about how improbable this could be, because why wouldn't Matthew have sensed Juliet in the barn?
Mm-hmm. Or smelled her.
Like, smelled her, heard her, or anything. And this was done slightly differently than how it was done in the book. And so I think they're valid questions. But I am always very, very generous when I see things like this. And so my impression is that he was so focused on Diana that Diana was his world in those moments. Mm-hmm. And Juliet appeared, like, she made it into the barn, like, just right before Diana sensed her there and started walking towards the barn, because she it was just moments before when she was like, I sense a vampiric presence this way. And then she's walking that way and we're like, Matthew's not there. And then there's Juliet. You know, it was done very quickly. And so I think we're supposed to believe that it was just so fast. Plus Matthew was so focused on Diana. That's why this situation could have occurred.
Yeah, I don't know. It was... I mean, I don't particularly care. I can just whistle past that. That's fine.
Okay. So it doesn't bother you that...
Like, I think the criticisms are valid, both in the show and the book, but I don't care. Like, whatever, it's fine. They wanted Juliet to, you know, appear out of the woods. Whatever.
Yeah, we needed the tension, and we needed Juliet to show up, because we've been leading to this the whole season of Juliet and Matthew being in the same place at the same time.
And yeah, that's that.
The whole episode.
Got one episode left.
We need more. I mean, for a penultimate episode, though, this was really good. I know we've talked about some things that we didn't really like or appreciate, but I think as a whole, this episode was really good. It had a lot of action. It had a lot of world building and progressing the story without doing it in an exposition sort of way. Like, it wasn't this like word dump. We were shown a lot of things instead of being told a lot of things.
Yeah. And let's be honest, the sexy times were real good.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, like, everybody, including us, we compare this TV show and the books to Twilight a lot, but like, I used to work at a bookstore, and I would always recommend these books to people who liked Outlander. And I would presume that the TV show got made in that vein, like, to appeal to that same audience. Because they're very different, but in a way they're also kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, Outlander is this without witches and vampires.
Yeah.
Honestly.
But I think it's interesting, the different takes that they're taking, whatever, on filming the sex scenes. Because Outlander is very much like nudity, yes, let's just show everything. And I don't have a problem with that. They have some very good sex scenes in Outlander. But in this show, it's a little more like, there haven't really been any nudity, and they're still really nicely done and still very sexy. And I'm kind of curious about why, like, who made that decision. But I like it. I like that it's different, that they're doing their own thing.
Yeah. I wonder if it has to do with, like, the time slot that they had. Maybe they couldn't show nudity for whenever it aired. I don't know, or if it was, like, just a ratings thing, like they were trying to keep it the equivalent of what would be PG-13 here. Maybe Teresa Good didn't want to do nudity. That's a possibility.
Teresa Palmer, Matthew Good.
Yeah.
Just like that's what we smooshed them. Neither of them wanted to do nudity.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know. But either way, I mean, it is filmed very well. All of their sex scenes have been filmed very well. I think their sex scenes have been some of my favorite scenes, just because the chemistry the actors have with each other is wonderful. Yeah. It is, and they clearly have fun while they're doing it. Doing it. That's not what I meant, but yeah, okay.
So that's obviously a favorite of ours, and I think all of our favorites that we've listed here, we've already really dived into. Marcus, fabulous. Diana's teasing of Matthew literally made a scene that I don't like in a previous episode better. So that's interesting. Everything with Sarah and M, so good.
Yeah, we've talked about all of our favorite stuff extensively. I don't think we need to call it out again. So
let's dive into our spoilers.
Well, if you have not read the books or watched all of the episodes, all one that is left, please proceed at your own risk. In this section, we are going to talk about things that may not have yet appeared in the show or don't at all. So please turn us off now if you don't want to be spoiled, and we will see you next week.
Alrighty. They've taken out any mention of Diana being frightened of her mother's magic. Like, there's a scene in the book where Diana remembers her mother doing some black magic or some dark magic or whatever they call it. and it frightening her. And this comes into play in book 3 about Diana being frightened of her own magic and that sort of thing. And so, I mean, I can understand why they took it out, but I kind of miss it.
Yeah.
And then they didn't really get into the people in the alchemical illustration looking like Diana and Matthew, which, is just more evidence that their relationship is important to the survival of the species and preordained almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think they tried just by saying, oh, look, that's Matthew's insignia.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to set something up there. It just wasn't done as in-depth as it was in the book.
Yeah. And then cutting that out also cuts out any conversation about foreshadowing them having children.
Yeah, that has been a thread that I have missed the entire season.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big plot thread to the overarching story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not been hinted at yet.
Yeah, I don't necessarily miss it this season, but I know I'm going to miss it in the future. I'm going to miss that it was not foreshadowed at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
I guess, I think actually that's a really good way to put it, because the way they told the story, if you don't know about it, you don't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you don't know what's missing. But I feel like once they do finally bring it in, I'm going to wish for sure that they had layered it in some way early on.
And then when time walking came up, I'm just a little bit sad that they cut out the stories about how Diana used to time walk when she was young, just because it showed a time where she enjoyed her magic and used it to, go back and get more birthday cake.
Yeah, so at this point, the version of Diana that we know has never enjoyed her magic in her life.
Yeah.
And I hope that one day we get to see that she remembers that magic was fun at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that I am most annoyed about and that I miss the most is that we are at the end of the season and there's really been no hint of Matthew's blood rage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a big point in book 2, and how Philippe comes to accept Diana has to do with Matthew's blood rage.
It's also a huge, huge point in the overarching story, like how they come to save all the species. These
right,
whatever
species. I think species is singular and plural.
Whatever.
I think
it's a huge thing. So for them to have not mentioned it at all is a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, especially since in the book it came up so early, so early, and it just isn't there, and so it makes me wonder. I feel like they're setting up season 2 to do so much heavy lifting that they could have eased by planting seeds in season 1.
Yeah,
that they didn't plant, and I really just wish they had.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of and they could have tied it in to Cecilia and Eleanor, because I forget which one it was, but at least one of them, Matthew, was in a rage when he killed her.
Yeah, that was Eleanor. So we still have one more episode to go. That is not going to clear up any of these things that we're talking about right now.
No.
So we'll see what happens.
So we'd love to know what you think of Matthew and Diana so far. Use #DesireMadeReal to join our conversation on Twitter. I'm Caitlin, and you can find my other show, Commander for Own, at commanderforown.com, or you can find me on Twitter at InferiorCaitlin.
And I am Mandy Kay, and you can find this show and all of the other Eloquent Gushing shows at eloquentgushing.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Eloquent Gushing, or you can find me on Twitter at Mandy Kay.
Join us next week as we talk about episode 8, the final episode where we will see my least favorite scene in the whole series.
Ooh.
So until we meet again, remember that with every ending, there's a new beginning.